I hope that what I'm going to do today is set the stage for you to think about this process, which takes a long time, right? From collecting information to deciding where to apply, to actually applying, to going through the interview process, hopefully having choices and making a selection, figuring out how to get started in that new place. We're talking about a big venture, right? A whole lot of time. And so what I want to try to do today is set the stage and give you a framework, not just for what school should I choose, but a little bit about how to handle the entire process. And I think it's important to continue to acknowledge the life-changing trajectory of the pandemic. Right? It has influenced all of your education, your internship experiences, and it will likely continue to influence decisions that we all make as we move forward. There's more uncertainty in our world than there used to be. And without a doubt, the pandemic, the last 2 years, has changed the way graduate admissions programs are run. So while we don't know how much we will return to pre-pandemic strategies and approaches of largely in-person activities, I think it's safe to say, although we're likely to get back to more in-person activities, that there will also likely be more virtual ones, informational sessions online, meet and greets with current students online. There might be recruiting events online and potentially interviews, or what I think eventually we'll call pre-interviews. So this idea that when we stay virtual, we can talk with many, many more applicants, and it allows us to find the really best folks. So perhaps there will be a two-step process of a pre-interview online and then a full interview in person. It's safe to say that this will continue unfolding. It will likely be influenced by what happens in the fall as variants emerge in the US, as the FDA makes recommendations about different vaccines, right? A lot of uncertainty. Furthermore, we are in a very, very difficult economic time. I know many of you feel that in your pocketbooks as your stipends don't quite go as far as they used to. Universities are also facing funding constraints. And so I think it's possible that we will see continued impact on the number of offers being made and slots available at various programs. That means as you move through this process in the fall, you're going to want to consider, should I apply to more schools than I would have a few years ago? Now, in some ways, that's a complicated process because budgets lead to fewer slots. You have to apply to more schools hitting your budget. And so one of the things I'm going to advocate that you all consider doing is being very open with schools, asking about fee waivers, reaching out when they offer a fee waiver to figure out what you need to do to get one. Some schools have waived application fees for participants at the NIH Graduate and Professional School Fair, right? So you have to visit the school at the fair, get your name on a list. So do whatever you have to do to give yourself the chance of applying to a good number of schools. Now, when we are in a period of uncertainty, we need to face the fact that our stress goes up. And we should really, I think, beyond talking about the uncertainty of the future, acknowledge that we are in a period of depletion, of burnout, so many things going on around us, from the January 6th inquiries and the political divisiveness, to recent rulings from the Supreme Court, to climate disasters to gun violence to continued issues of structural racism and various types of discrimination to issues within our own community of bullying and harassment, of how do we deal with the lost research time, all kinds of things. So we're a little bit depleted, and you are beginning a process that will add stress. Now, our minds are always looking to control risk. We're always looking for what we can control. The problem is that right now there are things we can't control. And the application process itself is full of things you can't control. You can put together a great application, but you're competing in a large pool and you have very little control of the outcome. So I just want to stress how important it is for you to focus your energies on the things you can control as you prepare for this. And one thing you can control is preparing your application, doing a great job on putting together what you need to put together, right? Whether that be your essays, whether that be your CV, resume, whether that be emails out to schools, right? You can really attend to your education using a lot of creativity as you have the last 2 years. Are there gaps you want to address as you prepare to apply? Are there things you want to complete to show people how good of a candidate you are? You can control paying attention to your career development, right? And using the grad school application resources, resources on informational interviewing, resources on resilience and well-being, those are things you can control. And if you have a foundation, a solid foundation of support as you go through this process, it's going to go much better. You also can pay attention to your own thoughts. You can develop your emotional literacy, pay attention to your well-being behaviors, things you do that are really helpful for stress management, things you do that aren't helpful as you enter this process. So overall, you can really pay attention and control many factors of this process. And the more you take control there, the easier it will be to deal with the uncertainty of, well, what's the Zoom? What's going to be on Zoom, what isn't? How many slots will they really have? Will I be able to visit in person, or will something happen? Put energy into what you can control, and then it's so much easier to let go of the things you wish you could control but can't. So with that general introduction of the philosophy of how to do this in a manageable way, I want to start with 3 first questions. These are like the first steps. And if you struggle as you sit later today and journal about these questions, then take that as a sign that you might not be ready for graduate school yet, right? For each and every individual, there is a right time. There's a developmental a set of developmental milestones that you meet. Some people need a few years before they head to grad school. And in fact, I would argue everyone needs a few years. This is a huge undertaking. It is really asking a lot of yourself. It is a deep commitment, and it's pretty reasonable to take some time. So if you've already taken time, you're a postbac, these questions might feel easier. If you're an undergrad, you might realize, oh, I really want to do something between undergrad and grad school. But start with these questions. And I advocate for journaling. I also think it would be great to sit and discuss this with other people in your research group, in your cohort. The more we talk about this, the better. And the first question is, why do I want to go to graduate school? It can't be because someone else is telling you you should go. It can't be because you don't want to let down this person or that person, whether it be a teacher, a mentor, a family member. It has to be driven internally by something you want to do with that degree. And that leads to the second question: where do I see myself in the future? Like looking ahead 10 years, close your eyes for a minute and envision where are you going to be? Are you going to be in front of a classroom? Are you going to be at a startup company? Are you going to be out doing field work? Are you going to be, working at a government agency? Fill in the blanks. Where do you see yourself? Now, I think most of you probably see yourself in a lot of different places, and that's really good. Run tapes for each of them. Why? Because the more you think about what is it that I really want to do in the future, the more you do that, the better able you will be to find a graduate experience that will help you reach these goals, while being flexible, knowing that where you see yourself right now could change dramatically. So 3 questions, all designed to help you decide, am I ready for this now? What is it that I want to do? And what do I need to have access to as a graduate student? Related to this idea of where do I see myself, there's an important paper that came out now quite some time ago, but it is really, to me, a pretty timeless paper. It's a paper that looks at graduate students' career decision-making from the beginning of a PhD program and then after a year and moving forward. And what it shows is a huge amount of change. Lots of students enter saying, I want to be an academic scientist, or I want to work in industry, I want to do science policy. They enter with one thought and they make a change at the end of a year or two. Some of this, I think, is due to some of the issues we have in academia of people looking at the life of faculty and saying, oh, maybe I don't want this. And I hope over time, as we address the need for culture change in science, that sort of pushing you away is minimized. Some of this is suddenly we get exposure to other careers. We start to see strengths that we didn't appreciate that we had. The bottom line of this paper is you are likely to change your mind. So whatever you're envisioning, right, in that first exercise, it needs to be a soft envisioning, right? And you want to do your best job to think broadly. Now, we know a lot about the outcome of PhD graduate students in scientific disciplines. We know that maybe a quarter go on to tenured or tenure track faculty positions in academic research institutions. We also know that the number of PhDs hired in industry and government, while they go up and down year to year to some degree, there hasn't been a massive increase. Although I do think there have been very dramatic increases in subfields. For example, data science has grown. I am sure the pandemic is going to drive an increase in public health careers. So there are ups and downs, but in general, right, there isn't this massive increase in the number of industry and government scientists. But where we have seen growth over the last decade and where we continue to see some growth are in science-related, what we call near research occupations, science administration, science policy, education and outreach, the business side of science, technology transfer, etc. Now, even though we are well aware of the career outcomes of our students and where our postdocs are heading, and we're aware of how broad and diverse it is, there's still a bias within many academic PhD programs towards preparing you for the narrowly focused academic career track. And so a take-home message from this is the more you look for a program that will help you become a well-rounded scientist with an understanding of the diversity of career outcomes, the better prepared you will be. So you are looking for a graduate program that helps you develop in many areas. in your research, in your science, right? Professionally, your ability to network, your ability to navigate complex collaborative projects, team science, your ability to be a leader, right? Professional skills. Personal skills, your well-being, your resilience, the way you tend to your mental health and physical health, the way you deal with setback and disappointment. So that's personal. And then career skills, your networking, your ability to write job documents, your ability to communicate your science and other things verbally. So science, professional, personal, and career. A program that helps you develop in all 4 of these areas will set you up for future success, regardless of how you define that success now or in the future. So a lot of times when we talk about choosing graduate programs, we focus on finding a place that does the science you want to do. Find a scientist who does exactly what you want and try to get a slot in their group. I think it's the wrong message. In fact, I know that it's the wrong message. The right message is that we live in very dynamic times. Science changes, the career landscape changes, we change, and it is critical that you find a graduate program that sets you up for success by giving you a holistic set of programs to address science, professional, personal, and career skills. And that is a really important message. In fact, more important than anything else I'm going to say. And I have been running graduate programs at universities and here at NIH since 1992. So I've been doing this a long time. And I can't stress enough how important it is that you find a well-rounded program. Now let's set that introduction aside and start talking about the process for you. And it starts with that first exercise that I gave you, and then it leads into a little bit of a reality check about, are you ready now, or do you need some time to get ready? Or are you ready, but you still prefer some time because of burnout, because it will be fun to travel and you might not get to do it later because of whatever reason. So some things to think about: academic preparation. Graduate school will give you additional academic preparation. You don't need to focus so deeply on this, but sometimes we appreciate we're missing a big skill set that would be good to find, or we look at our academic preparation and acknowledge that we hit some rough spots and that we'd really like to deal with some of those issues. We also want to look at our research skills. Now, research skills are transferable, right? So you can learn in one discipline and apply many of the things you learn to others. So again, don't be held back by the realization, oh, I don't know how to do this important thing. The question is, overall, have I developed a research skill set? Your ability to read and comprehend research papers, right? Graduate school is going to start from day one with a lot of reading and a lot of discussion of papers, a lot of critiquing of papers. Are you ready for that? What about your communication skills, both verbal communication skills and written communication skills? We don't do science majors in college a big favor by not requiring you to do a lot of writing, because then you reach the graduate level and suddenly we want you to write abstracts and papers and proposals, right? And it's a big part of the process. So do you feel ready for that? You want to make sure you understand career paths, that you have a sense of the expectations to succeed in those career paths. You want to walk in with some sophistication about the diversity in career outcomes. There are a lot of personal skills like time management skills, interpersonal skills, your ability to hear feedback and respond appropriately, your ability to be assertive when necessary, your ability to deal with conflict, right? Those are really important interpersonal skills. Your stress management skills, your resilience skills, your emotional intelligence. A lot of this is covered in the NIH Resilient Scientist series and as part of our leadership series, the Workplace Dynamics series. If you're an NIH postbac and you haven't participated in those, take a careful look. Make sure to do it before you go. If you are outside NIH, we offer many of these things now by webinar, and you are most welcome to join us. Another element of Am I Ready is am I ready now to sacrifice? Sacrifice time, sacrifice vacation, sacrifice flexibility in my life, sacrifice financially, right? And maybe the answer is, I know I'm going to be ready to do that eventually, but right now I don't want to live the constrained life as of a graduate student. I want a different life for a few years. There are no data to suggest you need to go right from undergraduate to graduate school. In fact, there are more data arguing otherwise. There are data saying the more ready you are, the more time you've taken to be certain, the more full-time research experience you have under your belt, the better. So are you ready now and willing to sacrifice? And then finally, you want to make sure that you take a look at your finances. These are really tough times. Inflation is up. I don't think stipends have gone up enough to keep track of that. Lots of appealing schools are in very, very expensive places. And you want to be able to make intentional, calm, careful decisions, which means thinking through your financial situation. It means making sure you understand what questions to ask about stipends, about insurance, about help with relocation, about help with housing if it's a very, very expensive place to live. So there are a lot of things that go into feeling ready. My gut feeling is that there's lots of pressure out there to feel ready immediately. And I really invite you to be really skeptical of pressure coming from others, right? Ask yourself, why would they be trying to set this timing for me, right? When you're ready, I think you'll really know. You'll be enthusiastic, even though you might be worried during the application process. If you feel pressured, just say there are other things to do in the meantime. Now, another thing that's a part of the self-knowledge of getting ready is knowing what type of program you want to apply for, right? There are PhD and other doctoral programs like PharmD and PsyD. These programs in the sciences, in the biomedical sciences, are sometimes department-based, meaning a department hosts a program, and sometimes they are interdepartmental. Sometimes they'll use the language umbrella program or interdisciplinary. You need to be familiar with that language because you'll hear about it as you apply, right? So that means you can choose to work with faculty in a variety of different departments. That means for some that you don't even need to announce a specialty or a focus until the end of your first year. So you could go in and broadly explore cell biology, genetics, biochemistry, and decide, what do I want to get my PhD in? Now, some doctoral programs are much more constrained, right? You pick a department and you pick a faculty sponsor right at the start. And so that's a big part of what you need to know at the outset. There are lots of students who struggle in deciding between professional degrees and getting an MD degree or DDS degree or other professional degree and getting a PhD. And there are combined degree programs. Some of these are funded by NIH training grants. They can be called medical scientist training programs. They are also dental scientist training programs. There are a few veterinary science training programs. These are combined degree programs funded by the NIH. The NIH gives a restricted number of these, and there are many other schools with combined degree programs, and you might hear them say, we don't have an MSTP, or someone might ask you, are you going to a school with an MSTP or not? There are some differences sometimes around the financial compensation. The idea of doing the dual degree is the same whether the program is funded by NIH or not, but sometimes the compensation is different. A lot of students explore careers in microbiology, and what they're really interested in more is the public health side. And so I want to make sure to stress that there are masters of public health degrees and PhDs in public health with a variety of subdisciplines. And sometimes because we haven't heard about those degrees, we don't tend to explore them as much. So I think it's well worth thinking about going back to that first prompt, where do I see myself in the long term? Maybe what you really need is a public health degree and not a PhD in microbiology. It's, again, really fluid and flexible depending on what you want, but it's good to do the thinking up front. Now, some students have looked at their futures and realized that what they want to do is work at the interface of science and management. They want to specialize in regulatory affairs and science, or occupational health safety and science, on the business side of science. And they want some familiarity with the science, but they also want this broader skill set of management. And there are a number of professional science masters out there that are really preparing you for those careers. Sometimes I talk to students at the end, towards the end of a PhD, and they say, oh, I think I could have gotten a master's and gotten on with my career. And there are all kinds of things to balance in making these decisions, but I don't think we talk about these master's programs enough. I think there's way too much pressure, sort of like you're on an assembly line. Oh, you love research and you're good at science. Oh, go get a PhD. I think what we should say is, if you see yourself working in these fields, explore all of your options for various degrees. So I wanted to put out some options there for all of you to look at. Now, some of you might get partway through this front end process and realize that either you don't feel ready or you just prefer some time. You have a couple of things to think about, and one is to do a research-oriented postbac. At the NIH is the postbac ERDA program. And some of you here might be postbacs already, you're summer interns or somewhere else. If you want to know about the postbac program, there's a great webinar online that explains it. If you're a summer intern, chat with some postbacs within your research group. You can also do a research-oriented postbac at a university, and these are often funded by the NIH, and they are called PrEP programs. PrEP programs are at universities. The postbac program is in the intramural program at NIH. This is a great way to get experience, to make sure you really want to do research, to explore what type of research you might like to do. Some students use this to make a little bit of a discipline shift. I did ecology research as an undergrad, but I really want to see what biomedical research is more like. So you can do it to gain skills, to explore new areas, to strengthen your research portfolio. You can also work as a technician somewhere. It is best if your boss supports your scientific and professional development. You can be a research assistant in areas of clinical research if you're preparing for a clinical psychology degree, preparing for any type of human subjects oriented research. So I should probably say technician or research assistant. You could consider relocating to somewhere you might like to go to school. You can get to know people there. You can explore the area. A known quantity is often a little bit of a boost in applying. You also could just choose to settle somewhere where you've always wanted to live and worry about moving to where you're going to go to grad school later. And one thing, if you take a job as a research assistant, as a technician, it's really best if your boss is supportive of your scientific and professional development, that you will have the opportunity to present, that you have the opportunity to design experiments, to learn about the publication process, the collaboration process, the skills that you need to succeed in graduate school. Sometimes people look at their academic preparation and their GPA, and they appreciate that they might need some coursework. If you choose to get a master's, if you decide outright to get a master's, I want to really caution you to discuss this first with mentors and make sure there's a solid reason for doing so. A lot of students take on debt for this when there are other ways to strengthen their academic record. Sometimes what we need is the master's, and so it's completely appropriate. You also can take isolated courses here and there while you're doing research. So perhaps you want to do a PhD in data science, but you have very little experience or coursework. You could take evening courses in aspects of data science. You want to make a move from the bench towards public health and population science. You might want to take an epidemiology course. The choices of what you take depend on your undergraduate record. Classes without some research is not often useful, although there are really good work experiences as well. So that's not universal. I think there's a lot of need to discuss these kinds of things with mentors as you're deciding what to do during your prep time. It's really worth chatting with mentors. So as you go through all of that, that leads you when you're ready to trying to decide, so what schools will I apply to? Now that I've done the work, I feel ready. Now that I've thought about the degree I want, the type of educational experience I'm looking for. All right, what next? And the next thing is to start making a list of schools. So some things to consider. First is the structure of the program, and this could be many things, and I'll go through all of them. The mentor selection process is a key one. If you have to choose a mentor in advance, then the whole process is driven by finding mentors at schools that feel right for you. So it's really two things, right? I have to match with someone and I have to feel good about the school. Some places you do rotations and you have a lot of flexibility. Some places you are required to do rotations. Make sure you understand how many, how long that takes, because you're not really getting along in your degree until you get started in your thesis lab. On the other hand, not doing rotations, you run the risk of landing in the wrong place, getting there and realizing the environment isn't supportive. So you want to really understand how you pick a thesis advisor. You want to understand, is there required coursework? Do you choose? Is there a certain number? Is there a set curriculum? What are you required to take? I don't think often coursework changes someone's decision, but all things being equal, I have had students tell me, I'm deciding between these two programs. They both seem like really a good place, but this one, I really like the first year student experience better. So it's something to consider. Teaching requirements, and I should say, and opportunities. So some of you, as you did that exercise in the opening slide, really are driven by a passion to teach, right? You don't want to go to a school that doesn't value teaching for their graduate students, right? That puts pressure on you not to teach. On the other hand, if teaching is important, but not the top of your list, you might not want to choose a program with a lot of teaching requirements. My opinion as a mentor, we all teach whatever job we do. So some access to teaching courses, some requirement to teach is a good thing. And so I would embrace it. But I can understand that for some of you, you're looking for a place with a lot of opportunities, and for some of you, not as high on the list. Now, we've already talked some about the tight economic times, so you want to think about the stipend, benefits, health insurance, access to a variety of student health resources, any other compensation they provide, a housing allowance, access to dorms, etc. That's another big thing in the structure of the program. You also want to understand, is there service attached to that stipend? Meaning, are you required to teach to get that stipend? Are you required to do anything in return for that stipend beyond your graduate school activities, right? Is there something added on? And then you want to ask about time to degree and the structure of the program to keep you moving along. I think many schools have really spent time thinking about how long it takes to get a PhD, how this can stretch. And many schools are much more proactive. You want to be at a school that is. Now, again, I stress that developing you as a whole person. Are there programs to help you develop professional skills? Are there internships and training opportunities? Things like the opportunity to explore industry or to shadow someone in a science policy office. I talk some about teaching under the teaching requirements, but maybe you want a lot of opportunities. You want pedagogy training, a future faculty program, a learning center where you can get coaching and training in teaching. As you think about developing you as a whole person, look at their commitment to building a welcoming and inclusive community, and look at their commitment to student well-being and a student wellness program. We know pre-pandemic that the rates of anxiety and depression in PhD populations, and I suspect that this is true at the master's level as well, is significantly higher than national averages. And I suspect this has to do with the amount of pressure in these careers, with the intensity of the educational experience, with the lack of balance that many STEM disciplines come with, right? We don't say take a lot of time off. We say, oh, scientists work all the time. So you want to make sure that you have a program that's going to give you the tools to grow in that area, to learn positive coping styles, to find time to take care of yourself. You should ask whether there's career counseling, right? Because graduate school is preparation for a career. I know we look at it very, very often as I'll get a PhD and then I'll do a postdoc and then I'll think about a career, but that is the wrong way to think about it. We need to look at graduate school as a part of our career preparation and then ask ourselves, do I need a postdoc? What kind of postdoc? So you want to look for that. And then finally, you want to make sure there are people really paying attention to your experience. Is there some place to go if you hit a snag? Are there program directors that are attentive and available? This is all leading to developing you as a professional, as a scientist, as a person, right? It's really all of that holistic development. You also want to look around you at the diversity of the students, the faculty, and the broader community. Are you seen and valued and heard for who you are? Is the institution and department actively engaged in building a welcoming and inclusive community? That means they talk about diversity and inclusion, but they also take action. That means that they look really broadly at differently abled individuals, at neurodiversity, at sexual and gender minorities, at the LGBTQ community, understanding the various types of religion and spirituality we bring to the table, race, ethnicity, all of these things. Will you be able to be the person you are? Can you fully be you on and off campus? Another thing to think about, are there student affinity groups? Are there learning communities focused on diversity and inclusion, helping you identify your own discomforts, grow in your views of diversity and inclusion, right? Is this a community that really is welcoming? Now, I think that this is on campus and off, and I know I've talked to many students over the last few years as we watch some legislative agendas in some states. I've had students say, I don't know if I can be safe there or comfortable there. And we are people first, and graduate students / scientists second. And I think it's okay for you to pause and say, where can I really feel supported? There is no perfect institution, but there are institutions striving to do better, and there are institutions paying lip service to doing better. There are institutions putting a lot of energy into this, institutions that are not. So it's really an important consideration. You also want to think about the geography and the cost of living. Distance from family is something I really want to address. Some people want to live very close to family, right? They draw a circle, or I want to be driving distance, or I want to be a direct flight away. Now, some look at their families and say, I need to be outside that circle. I need to be a certain distance away. And that's okay too, right? Our families, come with, they are who they are, and there are unique challenges, and sometimes we want to be a little farther away. So that's one thing. There's the need of partners and kids, if we are attached and if we have children that we care for, or for that matter, adults that we care for. We're supposed to make this decision based on science, but let's be honest, we're people. If you love being near the ocean, it's fair to say, let me look at schools near the ocean. If you love the winter, look for the winter. If you don't love the winter, you don't have to bundle up and be miserable just because there's a scientist there doing something you might want to do. It is fair to think about this as a person. Now, there's one last thing, and it's hard to know until you land there and talk to people, and that's program climate, morale, and student satisfaction. Some places look great on paper, but they're not so good in person. So you want to read websites, you want to look at what they talk about on the web, what activities are available for students, but you also want to talk to people. You want to do informational interviews, you want to talk to recruiters. Obviously, recruiters put their best foot forward, but what do they share? How do they answer your questions? So a lot to consider. And I have not started with where everyone thinks we should start, the quality of the institution and the science. That comes into play, but I really want you to remember those last few slides. They matter more because you can find quality science in a lot of places. So you can evaluate the quality of the department and the institution by looking at their research infrastructure. Do they have a lot of core facilities? Do they have centers of excellence focused on various areas? Are there a lot of support services? Is there an educational infrastructure there, a graduate student career office, graduate student well-being center? Is there a teaching center, right? These are things that tell you that it's a really quality institution. Is there a grant writing program, right? All of these kinds of things are indicators to you that you have access to important things. And then there are things around research excellence, the funding that they have, publications that students are involved in, the types of awards that students get and that faculty have. Those are some general ways to look at the research infrastructure. You can specifically look at the educational infrastructure by asking a lot of detailed questions about what's available. There's also something called an institutional training grant, and you may hear about these as you're interviewing. So I want to make sure that you are aware of them. So at NIH, these are sometimes called a T32. The NSF calls them an IGERT. I don't know what that stands for, but you can Google NSF IGERT. And then I'll talk about the BEST program right at the end. So an institutional training grant is when a funder gives a grant to a university to enhance predoctoral research training opportunities to support graduate students. These, you can think of this as an endorsement of the research and training enterprise, okay? Experts in education and experts in science have come and looked and said, oh, this is a good place to train. Let's support this school in providing some training slots for graduate students. And the reason you'll hear about these is someone might say, we can support you on a training grant for 2 years. Or someone might say, oh, you're interested in vascular biology. Well, we have a vascular biology training grant. That tells you that there's a community of vascular biologists. Lots of schools where there's excellent graduate programs do not have training grants, so this is not a requirement, but it is a wise thing to look for. Now, I talked about NIH and NSF, but some private foundations provide training grants, and so you might hear of others. Now, about, I don't know, in the mid-2010s, the NIH funded a program called the BEST, Broadening Experiences in Scientific Training. It was meant to drive universities to enhance career exploration and to prepare students better for the diversity of career outcomes. There are no more BEST grants, but you might, it was a short 10-year program, I think. You might have schools that say, we had a BEST grant, and now we have these internships with industry or this shadowing experience. You might hear about it. In general now, you're more likely to hear we have a robust career office, we have career counselors, we provide training in diverse career paths, but you might also hear about BEST grants. So that's research excellence, educational excellence. And then you need to say, okay, all that being equal, can I find what I want there? Now, for those of you who have to pick a mentor in advance, this is really a step where you need to sit for a long time, and you need to cross-reference the list of faculty you want to work with against the list of schools and what they offer. Right. And you really you're looking for a strong match in both. Oh, there's a faculty member I'm very excited about. There is a great infrastructure for graduate student support. I'm good to apply there. For those of you entering programs that allow rotations, you're just looking for overall what's available, right? You don't have to match with specific investigators, specific faculty, so you have flexibility. You want to look at scientific resources, right? The research space, core facilities. If you are interested in translational research, do you have access to important patient populations? I know for some people who look at the graduate partnership program, one of the reasons they're interested is access to the clinical center, right? Is there clinical patient populations and a clinical research infrastructure where you're going to go? Some of you might want to do field work. How easy is that? How much funding is there for that? And then what are the things that excite you? And are there critical masses in those areas? Now, I really encourage you not to get hooked on defining narrowly what you want to do. You know, we tend, there's this whole thing of the light lamppost effect, right? We lose our keys and we look under the light, even though we lost our keys somewhere else. It's just, there's light. We see the light, so we look there. So you are relatively early in your careers, you've learned about a smaller subset of disciplines. So you hold on to those. But some of you might dramatically change your mind as you move through graduate school. A while back, I gave a talk as part of the Clinical Center's student empowerment series. And I realized in that talk how dramatically my research interests changed in grad school. And I'm not the only one. So you want to look in big, broad, general areas. And you want to think about, are there a number of possible mentors that I might want to work with? It's not just their funding and publication record. It's also how they mentor and how they treat people, right? So you want to have a number of people that could make you happy. Some people say, what's a number? And I say at least 7. You know, if you are having to match, then that's the way the program works. And you'll do a lot of upfront homework to make sure you match in a really good environment. But if you don't have to, you want a place that has lots of options. So a lot of things to consider, and I've listed all of them. I've talked about them. I've listed them here again. It's really important to think broadly, and it is very important to beware of the prestige myth, right? So people, oh, it's such a great school. Often that is based on criteria not really relevant to graduate students. So sometimes our families push us towards one school or another, right? And it's based on name recognition. Sometimes it's based on the fact that they have excelled in a particular sport. Sometimes it's based on someone that family members knew who went there, right? Be careful, because just because it has a name as an undergraduate institution doesn't mean that it is an outstanding place for graduate students. To learn about schools and programs, you should definitely plan to attend the graduate and professional school fair. Emails are already going out about that. Invite all of your friends. It is open to people outside of NIH. You should look at any other virtual or in-person programs this summer and into the fall, where they are talking about graduate programs, giving you an opportunity to talk with graduate programs, meetings like SACNAS and ABRCAMS, undergraduate research fairs across the country. Be cautious and do not use the US News and World Report rankings. They don't look at a lot of these intangible, holistic training experiences. And so I would be careful about that. You should talk to teachers and mentors, but remember their potential biases. Sometimes they recommend a school because they went there or they have a friend there. It doesn't mean that that's a good school for you. So be cautious about, they say, oh, you have to go here, right? And there's not really a good reason for that. Nobody else should say that. I mean, nobody should say you have to go here. Only you can decide. We can give you our thoughts. We can share our impressions. We can ask you questions to help you decide, but we shouldn't be saying, oh, definitely go here or definitely apply there. You can look on the web. You'll find lots of information on the web. It can be a way to really get a sense of a school. Do they link to a career center for graduate students? Do they talk about time to degree? Is there information about diversity and inclusion and student affinity groups? Is there information on housing, etc.? Does it look like a place that really cares about their students? You can talk to peer mentors, alumni of your school, programs, summer programs, etc. If you're at NIH, you can join our alumni database, and then you can search the database for people at schools that interest you and programs that interest you. Now, always here, I get right away a whole bunch of questions. Well, what about emailing faculty? Shouldn't I be doing that? And the answer really is, it depends. So if you need to match with faculty in advance, or if the application process says, please tell us about 5 faculty whose research interests you, right? Then it makes sense to reach out to faculty. If you're trying to decide based on whether they might have an opening, appreciate that it's very far away. It's a year of application, then you get there. You don't start in a lab right away. People leave. Funding situations change, you change. I don't think it's a very good use of your time to email faculty if you're applying to schools where you can do rotations. Some small number of outreach might be relevant, but if you're going to be able to do rotations, don't email a lot of faculty. On the other hand, if you have to match with faculty in advance to start a program, really important to maybe even start there, right, while you're doing some of these other things in parallel. So really depends. And I feel really strongly that some students put so much energy into emailing faculty that they lose sight of other more important things. I want to segue a little bit, talk a little bit about the process, and then I'm going to set us up for additional webinars moving forward. So You are going to apply, right? You've decided, let me give you some insight into application and admissions committees. So some of them are very small, some are much larger. It depends on the size of the program. There's usually either a director of admissions or the program director serves as director of admissions, but there's usually one or two people in charge. They will be supported by an administrator, and you can communicate directly with the director of admissions or with the administrative support lead. Generally, applications are read in advance and discussed at a meeting. Some programs use rolling admissions and some don't. You have to understand this to decide strategies on applying. So when they use rolling admissions, it means as soon as complete applications come in, they start evaluating them. They start inviting people for interviews. If they have rolling admissions, it is in your best interest to get your application in somewhat early. If they don't have rolling admissions, you could wait till close to the deadline, but don't wait all the way up to the deadline, miss a deadline, have IT problems, it doesn't get submitted, and then you have to email and say, oh, I'm late. But when there's rolling admissions, you want to be sort of proactive and early. Now, program directors often have some discretion. Sometimes students say to me, I don't think I'm going to get in there, so I won't apply. And there is some element of setting our sights realistically, but sometimes it's a place we're really interested in. We read the eligibility criteria and we're off by a little bit on our what they say about GPA or how much experience in a certain thing. It is fine to reach out to a program director to talk about that. I read your website carefully. I see these eligibility criteria. I wonder if I could explain my situation and get your advice, because they sometimes have discretion there. I really encourage people to make a long list and then decide sort of where do I really want to be on this list. You want to talk about that list with other people, right? I'll talk a little bit about the idea of reach schools and safety schools, but don't just read a website and mind read and fortune tell that they don't want you. What we evaluate. So what are we going to look at? We're going to look some at your academic record. We're going to look at your research experience in and outside of your area of focus. So if you are making a dramatic change, we're going to look at your prior research experience, but we're going to make sure that there's some in this new area as well. We're going to read your personal statement, your research statement, diversity statement, whatever it is we ask you to submit. We're going to read those carefully. Think of those as a stand-in for you. We're going to look at your CV or resume or a list of research and other experiences, but those statements sort of bring you to life. We may look at standardized test scores. This is really in flux. We've learned a lot about the bias in these standardized tests. We've learned that they're not great indicators of success, so lots of schools have waived the requirement for GREs. We're also going to look at your recommendation letters. The views on the GREs, as I've said, are really rapidly changing right now. And I gave you 2 links to articles that are really important. Check websites. They should be updated with whether they require, whether they recommend or not, that you take either the general GREs or a subject GRE. If you are not sure and you want to talk strategy, you can email someone, tell them a little bit about your record. If it's recommended, what does recommended actually mean? You also can ask at the grad fair, and we have 300 plus schools. They're not all graduate schools. Some of them are professional programs, but there's a lot of graduate schools there. So you'll have some chances to ask. You should be thinking about who are you going to ask for letters of recommendation. 3 or 4 are typically required. At this point, they are almost all submitted online, and you give a name and an email address, they get a link. You need to think about mentors and teachers who know you well and who know you in relevant areas. These 2 things, generally you want to match both of these criteria. Right? Sometimes they know you for a short period of time, but it was such a relevant experience, it still makes for a good letter. You want to ask far in advance. You want to provide details. What kinds of programs are you applying for? I find it really helpful when people give me their resume and a cover letter, that, you know, their personal statement. I mean, not cover letter, but personal statement. It lets me, sort of jogs my memory, so that as I'm writing my letter, I know what they did. It's like a reminder. Letters of recommendation are thought to be good predictors of success in graduate school. So be thoughtful about who you ask. Now, I would like to address a really big stressor, and that is the fact that some of you worked in very large labs and you didn't get to know the PI or faculty member head of the lab. Some people will say to me, I'm not sure they even knew my name. It is fine to get the letter from the person that you worked closely with. All things being equal, it's best if they have completed their doctoral degree, so a postdoc, staff scientist. But you know, if you worked closely with a graduate student, that graduate student cares about you and can get advice from somebody more senior as they draft the letter, and it's okay. You also can ask that student or postdoc to have the faculty member co-sign or submit the letter jointly. So I know that's a stressor. I know another stressor is that you had a rough experience. It didn't go well. You didn't feel supported. It was somewhat of an uncollegial or very much an uncollegial work environment. So graduate program directors know this. We deal with this on a regular basis ourselves. We try to protect our students, and we are more and more aware that we need to not hold against applicants the lack of a letter from someone who really mistreated them in ways. Talk to current mentors about that. If you're here at NIH, talk to one of us in the OITE about it. Maybe there's someone in the branch who can write you a letter. Sometimes folks turn to us to get one letter and to sort of explain why there's not a letter from a particular NIH mentor. It can be a cause of stress. So reach out and get information about that early. This is one of the things you can be thinking about early. You don't need to leave it till last minute and add to your stress. As you put together your application, I wanted to give you some prompts to help you prepare a strong application. You can journal about these, you can think about these. The reason I like for you to do these is a lot of times students say to me, I don't even, I was a good student, I did some research, I don't know how to sell myself. Sometimes culturally we've been told not to sell ourselves. Sometimes people have dumped all kinds of distorted stories about us on us, right? So we have all these, those of you who've done the resilience series know, we have all these stories we're telling. I find these prompts help us separate those stories from our strengths and our successes and what we've accomplished. So these are some things that you might want to journal about. Schools are asking a lot about obstacles that you've overcome in school and in life. It's important as you write about that not to overdo it, not to share too much, right? It's important to put it into context. And so thinking about it in advance can help a lot. Also can be very helpful in advance to think about gaps or discrepancies in your academic record. Maybe you'll choose not to write about it, but how will you talk about it if someone asks you about it, right? How do you see it as part of who you are? And then finally, why are you interested in that particular school and program? They will ask. They would love to see it in one of your statements, and it will come up again and again. So there are a lot of different prompts here and questions for you to work with. So again, my goal today isn't to tell you how to write a statement. It's to set you a framework for making this manageable. In fact, even I would stress making it fun, right? Not to say it's all fun. This is about evaluation and high stress, but the honest truth is it's really an amazing accomplishment to get to this step and to be ready for this. And so I do want you to sit back a little bit from a place of pride as you go through this. A few things for you to consider. The goal of your written application is to get an interview. So take this step seriously. Some of your faculty members applied long time ago when it was much, much, much easier to get in. Some will say something like, oh, students from this school or NIH postbacks, they always get in. That is not true. The written application shows your seriousness. It is your way of representing you. Even if you met some faculty member who came to give a seminar, or they visited your poster at a meeting, or they're a friend of your PI's, that will not get you an interview. That might get you a second look. It might not. What will get you a second look and an interview is a compellingly clear application. You can apply to too many schools or too few schools. Too many, you are overrun with interviews at places you probably don't want to go. They pressure, you get all sort of overwhelmed by scheduling. You can also apply to too few schools. Now, sometimes you have to do that because you have to live in a certain area and there are only a few schools. You can look at whether there are multiple programs in those schools. Right now, I think 8 to 10 is probably a reasonable amount. It will be interesting for you to ask that question at the grad fair. There will be a panel on PhD programs, a panel on other types of graduate programs. Ask, right? For clinical psychology, 10 is not likely enough, right? So there are some really unique spins, right? I think that it's really important to discuss what we mean by reach school and safety school. So there's no such thing as an absolutely safe school, but there are schools where we feel we have the credentials to get in, and knowledgeable mentors agree. And notice I said knowledgeable mentors. Some people are not familiar with graduate admissions at all, or in the US, right? Depending on the people you work for, they may not have a lot of knowledge of current graduate admissions. But a safety school is a school where a knowledgeable person looks at your record and says, yeah, you have a good shot of getting in there. You certainly, actually, what we should be saying is you have a good shot of getting an interview, because then the interview sort of resets the playing field, right? And once you get an interview, you can sort of seal the deal or undo the deal. A reach school is a school where your record is somewhat outside and less than the average record of their students. So it's a reach. You may not get in. They typically take people with multiple publications, or in a School of Public Health, they take people with several years of experience in the public health arena. In a clinical psychology, they take people who have been doing clinical research for several years, right? Your GPA or experiences are somewhat outside of the norm for their students, and that would be a reach school. You can talk to the directors of reach schools and ask for an honest assessment. You can decide the balance for yourself of safe schools and reach schools. I think that waiting until the last minute adds a tremendous amount of stress to an already stressful process. So you want to get started on things soon. You also want to be very, very aware of deadlines. Get yourself a notebook. Have a section up front for exploring various schools, and as you decide to apply, a section for each school you're applying, where you can keep your communications, where you can keep your application. You could do this electronically if you want to. I would most certainly do it electronically. But key is to have an organizational system. That table up front should have application deadlines. It should have requirements, right? It should have notes on any types of recruiting events that they're doing, because missing deadlines and asking for an extension doesn't make a good impression. And you don't want to be stressed, and you don't want that stress to influence the way you handle this, right? And when we're stressed, we sometimes work furiously, but not smartly. Finally, you want to get advice from knowledgeable people along the way. Some people are very well-meaning, but well-meaning doesn't mean well-skilled. Some people know a lot about graduate admissions, some people know less. The thing is that sometimes we don't even know what we don't know. If you are at NIH, I really want to encourage you to use the OITE resources for graduate admissions, the entire series, the graduate school fair, make individual appointments. If you are outside the NIH, come to our events that are open to everyone and find additional resources on your campus. This is a stressful process. I've said that already. Sometimes I worry I say it too much, but I think hearing it really helps many people develop a framework and a structure. It doesn't need to be as stressful as it might be. So make sure that you are managing the process and the stress of the process. So use resources to make a plan, use your family, however you define that, your friends, your mentors, your peers for support. Develop your resilience and your well-being practice now. So if you're at NIH, look for our monthly resilience skills groups, look for drop-in groups, look for the start of the Resilient Scientist series in the fall. We will be opening the Resilient Scientist series to students outside NIH again this fall. So make sure to join us. In addition to dealing with the stress during the application process is the fact that grad school itself is a stressful process. So really a couple of things to keep in mind there. I'm going to stress the Resilient Scientist series again. Over 70 schools have participated in training with the hopes of offering elements of the program on their campus. That tells you how much we worry about the resilience and well-being of graduate students. The more skills you have going in, the more they grow while you're there, and the better you withstand the inevitable ups and downs. We will host a spring webinar on making a successful transition. It's more important than these webinars, quite frankly. When you get to graduate school, use campus resources for stress management and for well-being. And don't get blinded by the science. And by that, I mean, don't get there. You see someone doing something, you get excited about it, and you ignore whether they are a good person and a good mentor, whether the climate is a welcoming climate or a tormenting climate. We know that having a supportive mentor is protective for graduate student mental health and well-being. There are other protective factors, like learning those resilience skills that we're trying to teach, taking time for hobbies, for rest and relaxation. We know that there are multiple protective factors, but one protective factor is having a supportive mentor, and that goes together, hopefully with being in a supportive program. So do not get blinded by the science. So with that, I am going to take questions out of the chat. What is the process for a university to get a T32? Is it like a traditional grant review process? So a T32 application is a very large application where you write about faculty, students, the educational enrichment activities, why you feel that you have excellence in this area. You provide data of 10 years of your graduate students. You provide data on the mentoring records of your faculty. And then there's usually a site visit, meaning people come out and they meet students, they meet faculty. So it's a pretty rigorous process. They hear from all stakeholders and then they get together and rank them. Should we contact program directors to answer questions about the program? Many program websites I've looked at have very little information and their websites are cryptic. So first of all, I think it says something if the website is totally cryptic, and I'm not sure it says something so positive. I think that you should first read the website, and if there's not a lot of information, then you should email and ask if there's an informational session if they have further information. Do not email program directors without reading the website. So I must get, 8 or 10 emails a week from someone who says they want to apply to some program at NIH. And when I respond back and say, did you watch the video? And they say no, it doesn't make a great impression. I'm busy and I don't remember and I don't make the admissions decision, so it doesn't really matter. But why risk making a poor decision on a poor impression on a program director? So read the website first. Applying early, what does that mean? Okay, so what that means is, let's say a school says applications open in September, and we will make decisions on a rolling basis through February 1. You do not have to have your application in on day one, but having your application in within the first several weeks, maybe up to 6 weeks, would be really advisable. Okay, you should not be putting together applications, this early, right? You should be thinking about your statement and getting started on it. You should be tightening up your CV and resume. You should be exploring schools, but you don't need to be hitting submit yet. So hopefully that helps with what I mean by early. What are your thoughts on pursuing a PhD in another country? I'm drawn to international experiences, considering how many other countries offer 3-year PhDs. So whether to go to an international country is really a personal decision. Some people are really drawn to that international experience. Graduate school is stressful, and doing graduate school far away from support systems can be more stressful. You have to weigh the thrills of international experience and the drawbacks for you personally, knowing who you are, how your nervous system is wired, what excites you, what worries you. The issues of short versus long PhDs, I think too long is actually a problem. And the 7-year, 8-year, no control over time to degree, I don't think it says anything very good about those of us who allow that to happen often. 3 years to me is very, very short, because to make it in science means you've developed a lot of these other skills. And if you only have 3 years and your money runs out at the end of 3 years, you can find yourself without a whole lot of skills. So I have some thoughts about the really short programs that I'm not sure they're doing a great service. Of course, you can develop some of those skills as a postdoc. So I think for some, it's a great idea. And for others, it's really, it really adds stress. Is there an advantage to applying early for rolling applications? Yes, if there's rolling admissions, they're starting to offer interview slots, and let's say they have 60. And let's say by the time you put your application in all the way at the end, there's only 10 slots left. It's going to be harder to get an invite. So if they do rolling admissions, it makes a lot of sense for you to apply within the first six to 8 weeks when it opens. When is the appropriate time to ask about funding and stipends? I think that should be provided on a website. We all have to pay bills. We all have to live. Some people come with the privilege of, financial backing from others. Some people don't, and you really need to know what's being offered. So my hope is it would be on the website. If not, it is completely appropriate to ask before you decide whether to apply. If it's a very high rent area and you're not going to be able to afford it unless there's a high stipend or a housing subsidy or a place to live, how can you know that if you don't ask? So I think it is completely appropriate to ask early. For a program with rotations, how intensely should we research potential faculty members? I think you should be making sure there's a lot of science that excites you, but I don't think you should be looking for rotations. It's a year out at least. Funding situations change. You can't learn about the environment of the group very easily. Your interests change. You may not go to that school. If you're looking at 6 to 8 people at 8 to 10 schools, that's a crazy number of people. You could be doing better things with that time. So if they allow rotations, you should just be looking in big, broad areas. You should be making sure that as you look at some lists, people jump out that excite you, but you don't need to be contacting all of them. Where do we find stats of schools, the students, to find out if we would be considered a competitive applicant? Some schools publish this on their website. Again, that's a sign of a school that's trying to be transparent and give information. Some schools publish statistics on where people go next. How many do postdocs in academia, how many in industry, how many go right into jobs, what types of jobs. Transparency is a good thing. So my hope is that a lot of schools are transparent and they say, this is what our typical applicant looks like. Some say we really do a holistic review, right? Please don't get wrapped up in GPA. Well, that tells you a lot. If you are unsure, then you should make sure to talk with someone, come to the grad fair and ask, what does a typical strong applicant look like? If, you really have doubts, I'll tell you, my GPA was about a 3.1. It had some real ouch spots. So some of that 3.1 was an artificial elevation by some courses that weren't very relevant to graduate school admissions, and I talked to schools, right? I mean, it was a long time ago. It was a lot easier to get in. But that principle of being transparent and making an inquiry still applies. So you can talk to someone at the grad fair and ask, can I follow up with you? And you can say, I want to be transparent. Here's my record. What are your thoughts? So if they don't publish information, ask. If you still have concerns, even if it's published, ask. There's a comment here about international PhDs require you to have a master's degree first. That is not true of all. We have lots of our students who do international PhDs and do not have masters. That is true of some programs, and so you'll want to check and be certain first. If a program at a university we're interested in has only been started within the past couple of years, what are some additional questions to keep in mind about as we research the program? I'm looking at master's in bioinformatics programs. A lot of them have only been around for a couple of years. So I think what you want to look for is a robust placement center for students. What do they do to help you get jobs? You really want to talk to students who are in the first class, the second, the third, however many years. You want to talk to students spread along, because it's likely that there were some bumps right at the start. A school that fixed those bumps, that tells you a lot, right? They listened to students, they listened to faculty, they looked at what's happening. So that tells you a lot. You want to be asking questions about accreditation if that's relevant. It doesn't matter in many master's level programs, but it does matter in some. So think about, will you need to get some type of certification or licensure? Is this program accredited? That's another thing to ask about new programs. Is there NIH funding we can apply for before or while we apply for PhDs? There is not. NIH training grants to institutions go to institutions, and there's something called an individual fellowship award, and you have to already be at the school and in a research group and started on a project. The NSF does have a program you can apply for while you're applying, and often we host an NSF informational session. It's the NSF Graduate GFRP, Graduate Fellowship. It's an NSF program. Yewan or Natasha will get the acronym right for me and put it into the chat. The Howard Hughes Medical Institution, the Ford Foundation, some other private societies and philanthropic organizations offer graduate awards. There are databases that you can search for funding for graduate school, and you'll find some things, not as many things as I wish there was. And I think one of the key messages there is to look at what the school is offering you. You might say, well, I have to pay, maybe it's a master's, I have to pay, but my earning potential is quite substantial. Do the math. right? There's a risk reward calculation that needs to be done. At the PhD level, many, but not all PhD programs offer compensation. I think you should do your best to find a program that offers compensation. You're not going to get rich, but what you don't want is to leave graduate school with a deep amount of debt. And so you need to be asking schools what they offer. You need to be asking students, how is it that they live on that stipend, right? Do they have to commute from really far away, or is there close shared housing? Is there a housing allowance? Is the student health insurance high quality or not? Those of you with pre-existing conditions want to look at the insurance through your own lens, right? Is this going to be adequate for me? And so I think I think that looking for fellowships is important, but that you're going to find less than you expect. How many research experiences should we focus on for application? Should we discuss research that is not necessarily in our focus area, but build certain skills? I'll answer the second part first. You should discuss research experiences that help you build certain skills, point out that you've developed those skills. Maybe you don't go into quite as much depth. How many research experiences? There is no magic number, but 1 10-week summer experience is generally not considered enough. It's interesting. It used to be that you could get in with less experience, but now, as we realize what it takes to be successful and sort of the really broad skill set, people are looking for more and more experience. So I would say a couple of in-depth, really relevant experiences. That's not to say that somebody right out of undergrad, won't get in, especially if you did research during the school year and different research experiences in the summer, right? So there is no one answer to that, but sitting with a mentor and making sure that you have deep enough experiences is worthwhile. How far away is too far away when it comes to commuting? Well, I'm glad you say in your opinion, because there is no one right answer for this. Everyone is different, so I know people who commute 90 minutes every day and say that it's doable. If there's public transportation, they can use it for studying. It's different. Gas right now is so expensive. You'd have to factor in all of that gas if you were commuting by car. I think that each of us answers that question on their own. It sometimes changes for us over time. We moved during the pandemic, and one of the things that I was really excited about is it moved me into a much more realistic, bikeable commute. To some people, that wouldn't be relevant at all. So you need to ask yourself what you can do and tolerate. For those of you doing bench research, I think closer is better. For those of you doing more computational, data science, epidemiology, I think that maybe you won't need to be on campus every day. And so perhaps you could go farther away. But really, that's a pretty personal thing there. I think I actually covered everything. I'm going to give you a minute if there are more questions. Oh, a follow-up on the commuting. I asked because you mentioned clinical psych programs require more applications. I'm limited in the area I can apply to. I think then you might be more open to a farther commute. I also would encourage you to spend a lot of time talking to faculty early, now, long before they are choosing, so that you have cultivated relationships at that school and with those individuals. And the reality is sometimes because of life, we are more constrained. And then we have to do our application process modified by that constraint. And so I would encourage you to chat with people about that and reach out to schools in that area. Can I clarify if GPP applications are rolling? This is embarrassing. I have no idea, and I do not believe that they are. But you would need to email the GPP folks and ask them. How important do you think publications are, especially right out of undergrad? So I think for some schools, publications are weighed very heavily. They're always good, but lots of people get into graduate school without publications, or they are in the middle of a list of folks. And when we asked what did they do, it was one small amount during a short internship. I think that there's a set of schools where having publications matters much, much more. It's one of the things that factors into, is this a reach school or not? If your GPA is strong, one of the next things is, what are the depths of your research experience and what are your publications? So again, that is a really, really important thing for you to talk about with knowledgeable mentors. Can I talk a little bit about student insurance? What should you be thinking about? So first of all, you want to find out what are free resources for you on campus, and do they have capacity? One of the key things is mental health benefits. You know, one of the best ways to deal with the stress of graduate school and the ups and downs of relationships with your mentors is finding a counselor or therapist, and a lot of them don't take insurance. So how good are your out-of-network benefits? You know, I've been having insurance for decades, and I think I still haven't learned everything that I need to fully understand. We think of insurance as a black box, and it's worth saying, what are the out-of-network benefits? Are there good mental health benefits? If you currently take any drugs, you want to find out if they are covered by the insurance policy. But I would start by asking what's at student health. You also should ask how much you need to pay for that student insurance, or will it be provided without payment? So those are a couple of things. I think a good thing to do if you don't understand insurance at all is to find some basic information online explaining insurance, right? And preferably not someone trying to sell you something, but like the Obamacare exchange website to explain insurance, or some nonprofit around access to healthcare. I also acknowledge the concern of many young women at this time around reproductive health services, the concern of trans individuals around access to appropriate health care. I think that a part of what we look at is, does the policy give us what we need to take care of ourselves? Fertility benefits, benefits for childbirth, right? You might want to look at what is provided. You know, graduate school can be for a while, so things can happen, right? And I think it's worth learning a little bit about that. Are poster presentations relevant? Yes, they are very relevant. That is an important skill. Do you recommend getting rec letters only from research mentors or professors as well? It depends on when you graduated. If you've been out a while, you don't necessarily need a letter from a teacher unless they really knew you well as an undergrad. The longer you're out, the fewer letters from teachers. If you're switching industries, would you benefit from getting someone from your old industry to write a letter, or should it be only within your research field? It is absolutely fine to have a letter from someone in the previous field, what you did. They can talk a lot about personal characteristics. They can talk about problem solving, interpersonal skills, teamwork. They can cover a lot of really relevant things. Sometimes they can also reflect on your transition, how it is that you came to be really interested in this. And so I would recommend go back to that concept of, do they know you well, and do they know you in relevant ways, and just expand relevant ways. It's not just in the discipline, it's the skills that go into being a successful scientist. So that was a flurry of a few more questions. Hopefully I covered all of them and didn't miss any. I'm going to pause one more time. All right, I don't see if I have a publication and conference presentation in humanities, should I include that in my science CV? Yes, you should. You know, eventually you will take those things off, but at this early stage of your career, you most certainly should include all of your academic achievements. They tell us a lot about you. And more PhD programs are coming to appreciate that we would benefit from well-rounded individuals, right? To be a good citizen scientist, to fulfill our obligation to build a diverse and welcoming collegial work climate, to solve the problems that we face around diversity and inclusion, means to have people who have interpersonal skills, who care more broadly about issues, who are willing to be vulnerable and put themselves into new situations. So sometimes those humanities experiences, you think, oh, that's not impressive. And we look at it and say, wow, this brings something to our community. So I would encourage you not to include very many, if anything, from high school. It starts to be irrelevant, but college is very, very relevant. Poster presentations for school symposia, should they go, even if they weren't presented at a conference? Yes. If it was like an undergraduate honors conference at your school, NIH Postbac Poster Day, NIH Summer Poster Day, yeah, those matter. That means you took the time to make a poster, you talked to people about your science, you developed an important skill. So absolutely, it does not need to be a national or international meeting. You know, if we limited ourselves to looking at national or international meetings, like that's really an equity issue, because some people aren't at an institution that can afford to send them, or they have family, or they have a job. Finances don't allow it. Those experiences on your school, they are great experiences, and we pay attention to them. So please be thoughtful about including them. All right, I think I really did cover everything at this point. So I wish you all the very, very best. I am going to be at the grad fair. I hope all of you are going to be at the grad fair. Spread the word to all of your friends. And I acknowledge that not every school is there, and some disciplines aren't as well represented as others. And I'm really sorry about that. We can't make schools come, but I do think there's just this general feeling of being a part of a community that really wants to do good and make change moving forward. So it's a really wonderful activity. So you all take good care, and I will hopefully see you soon.